All right, thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you guys realize these women sitting up here control everything.
Women sitting up.
So you know,
Except the men, we don't control them.
So I am thrilled. I mean, I didn't want anyone else to moderate this because I've known all of you for a little while, and I absolutely love that you guys are here today and that you're willing to put yourself out there to the torture of what we're going to be asking you later on. So one of the questions I wanted to start with is really, what are the shifts in our Canadian industry that will impact content? And I think we talked a little bit about this in the prep. I'm going to start with Valerie. I'd like to start.
Listen,
hasn't had much sleep.
my
Be kind.
head hit the pillow last night at 3 a.m. after a 6-hour delay out of LAX where I saw Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
My daughter bought me a ticket. Fucking fantastic, I have to tell you. She brought on Elton John, Meryl Streep, Rita Wilson, just a minute, Annie Lennox, and oh my God, I've forgotten his name. He's the most incredible musician out of New York. JB, somebody else, you guys will know him in here. He's fantastic. You must know him. Anyway.
We only know Canadians, Val.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, I too am a senior. Got 7 years on you. 72 in August, and I got to tell you, my dream remains to be carded at the liquor board store. So if you know anybody who'll do that just for fun, it'd be great. Well, there's a lot of shifts in the industry, as you all know, because you guys live it every day. Everything's changing. One of the biggest drivers, I just feel bad for these people that they can't. Sorry, are you okay?
They got
Over
the
there?
cheap
Okay.
seats.
All right.
There's tables.
There were cheap seats?
Yeah, there were cheap seats.
Everybody knows that probably, there's been so much disruption over the last 10 years, but likely we're about to see another huge revolution in this sector with oh, that's nice. That's better. Doesn't that feel better? Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
There's a huge disruption in the industry with the advent of artificial intelligence, and none of us can really tell where that's going to go. I think more locally, you all know we had a few years of trying to get legislation passed to bring the streamers into the country. Well, it worked, at least the legislation worked. CRTC has made their initial decision on the base contributions, and there's more to come on that. So that's another huge just disruption and uncertainty, really, and I'm sure we'll get into more of that. But the best disruption, I think, is what's happened in this industry around bringing people who've never had access in to have access. And I just want to take a moment, like 50 years, 25 years, there's one of the major leaders in the country sitting right here beside us that deserves, and her board and staff, a huge, huge acknowledgement. Because this work is tireless, and there's so many barriers, there's so many obstacles, and money is so hard to get everywhere. And we're going to talk about that. So I'm happy to talk on any of those points, but I'll let these fine women continue.
I love that. Let's go. We'll do Prem. Keep you all on your toes. I'm just going to random,
okay.
John Baptiste, that was his name. I'm not
John
that
Baptiste.
tired.
Oh, yeah.
John Baptiste.
He's awesome. So shifts in the industry. I mean, as Val said, we've been in this sort of holding pattern, yet there's things happening and moving forward, but not fast enough. For us, I'm based in Vancouver, so we are a provincial agency, very similar to Ontario Creates. So we have sort of a provincial lens, but obviously we're always looking nationally as well. And, one of the shifts or just things that we see that we're doing more of are partnerships with almost everybody on this panel, whether they're, with Ontario, we're in, a market internationally, and we're doing a joint event to doing top-up programs with Telefilm and joint programs with CMF. That is one of the biggest shifts I think that we've all seen over the years, where we can't do it alone as organizations. We all have a limited pot of funding. They're all in, excessive demand. So you may have, let's say you have $100,000 and you will get $1 million in requests for that $100,000, to your point earlier. So, that collaboration and partnerships it's always been there, but the shift toward that becoming the norm, I think, is one of the biggest things that certainly, you know, from where we sit, that is becoming more and more important, not just for us, but also organizations coming together, even when they're coming to us for support and funding, and really encouraging that interprovincial co-productions and relationships, not just internationally. So there's a group of BC producers here last week that were meeting with Ontario producers and the broadcasters here. That is what we certainly, you know, again, it is a shift, but it is a shift that now is even more accelerated than ever before. Is the nobody can go it alone, so we have to continue to think about creative partnerships and collaborations.
Thank you. I'm going to you, Karen, last, only because I know you have some funding changes that I want to ask you about. So, Julie, what are the shifts you see in the Canadian industry that are really going to impact a lot of the Canadian content out there?
Yeah, well, first, maybe I would like to answer this question to speak a bit about me and my background, because I'm the newest in this group, and many of you might, pardon me? And well,
Probably the youngest, yeah.
I won't go there. Yeah, and many of you might not me know very well. So I've been a producer for many, many years, mainly at the National Film Board of Canada, so producer and executive producer. So I'm sharing this because I was, you know, part of that industry. I'm part of industry for more than 30 years now, and I was in a position to see the evolving of, you know, the cinema, the film industry, and all the audiovisual industry as well. So I could see, you know, the challenges that creators were facing, and in particular, underrepresented group. Also, I'm a mother, and my daughter just turned 22 weeks ago, and she started to study cinema at university in Montreal. What a surprise. And she would like to be a DOP, and I can see through her and her colleagues at university that there's still this willingness to watch film in theater and having this big screen experience, and going on Letterboxd, you know, to talk about the film that they are watching and share their recommendations and comments. So that makes me quite positive, and you know, what we are doing is still relevant and important. And she might not be representative of everyone, but it is so important for her to see her on big screen. So she's watching Canadian and Quebec content on TV and on big screen as well. And this is something that we are talking at Telefilm, you know, to make sure that the audience can see themselves on screen. It is so important. And it goes back to the EDI shift that started a few years ago. At Telefilm, we are about to launch our third EDI action plan. The first action plan, you know, released in 2020 was really about, you know, listening, acknowledging. The second action plan was really about data collection and implementing KPIs and real precise targets. And now what we want to work on is really to implement internal reflexes. This has to be part of our daily work. And I think there's still a lot of work to continue, but there's progress. And I mean, if our organization continue to be committed, I mean, at the Canadian Screen Award a few months ago, it was beautiful on screen, on the stage, to see the people that were there. So anyway, that makes me optimistic.
I love that, yeah. How many of you watch the Canadian Screen Awards? For the ones that didn't, shame, shame, shame. Just needed to say that. Karen, now you have some new funding opportunities over at Ontario Creates. You're giving everyone $1 million here in the room, so I think that's a good start. Thank you, Karen.
If only there was... Is this on? Can you hear me? There we go. This one works. Thank you. Maybe just picking up on the question about shifts, just to build on what everyone else is saying, thinking about the perspective of everyone in this room, I think fundamentally when you set aside the big policy questions and so on that are happening and changing, it's all about the increase in competitiveness of the marketplace, and whether that's about finding audiences or finding money. Those are the shifts that we're seeing, and those are the struggles we're seeing. with all of the creators that we're trying to support. So as part of our strategic plan that we launched a couple of years ago, we have just finished doing a review of all of our intellectual property funding programs, and that includes our film fund and our interactive digital media fund. So watch for some new announcements coming late this year or early next. I can't give you all the details today, but I can say we are as an organization really trying to shift the way we think about funding and support for each of you. Not trying to force you to fit into our specific sandbox, but being much more flexible in the design of our programming. And what that means for us is that we're trying to be open to mentorships and other kinds of sort of training programs within our funding, that we want to be flexible in the business models that you're using to design and create your content, that we're not trying to force anyone to say this is a film or this is a game, or trying to be adaptable to the various kinds of platforms and so on that are out there, really trying to accelerate and elevate some of that content that just isn't making it to the screen right now, being much more transparent about the EDI priorities and criteria that we're using to evaluate all of those applications that are coming into us, being more predictable about the funding tiers and how much you can reasonably expect to get out of support from Ontario Creates, as well as the partnerships that Prem is talking about that we're doing with each of the organizations sitting on the stage with us today. So watch for a new IP fund coming your way sometime soon.
Excellent. I think Valerie wanted to add to that too.
Well, I was thinking when Karen was speaking, every one of these organizations on this stage, plus anywhere else you go to for money, are oversubscribed, and excessively oversubscribed. And that's one of the things that is a challenge for all of us. So I think as you've heard, we're all pivoting to figure out a different way to support creative ideas. Because if you're not on the side of the content, I don't know whose side you're on. And from my perspective, that the fund particularly, which has been one of the most restrictive in its structure, it's not for lack of story and ideas and talent in this country. Canada is blessed. Look at this room. Canada is blessed with talented people. But many of these structures were set up many years ago, and often they're in the way. We were told when the CMF came into being, go out there and finance the most creative stories and this, and make sure you get the ones that'll resonate with Canadian audiences and international, and do gaming and do VR, and oh yeah, don't forget about linear TV, and do all of it. But you have to do 1/3 French, 2/3 English. You have to do French outside Quebec, English inside Quebec. You have to do, and the list goes on and on and on. So by the time you meet all those obligations from a policy perspective, there's much room to do anything much creative. Now, I will say all of that is changing. We've had tremendous new flexibility. We're all consulting. We're certainly consulting this fall with the wider industry. And one thing, I don't want to forget this. You guys worked so hard to fight to get the money back for the renewal of the 3-year program. So just a reminder, that ends in 2025. And when we are in a very uncertain political environment any day now. So we need to get this renewed. We've been working for several months on it. It's the top of the list for a priority. And we're not as rushed as we were at 4 o'clock that afternoon to get a bunch of signatures. So I think just, with the leadership in this community, it's really time to get your voice heard about how critical that program is. I know we did over 300 Black projects. I was asking Richard if we have the stats for the 3rd year yet. We don't. Yes, it was renewed for 2 years, but this is one, and 2025 is the next. And if we don't get it renewed in this fall or spring, likely the government may fall on the spring budget. So now is kind of the time to just get that strong voice of this, because we can do a lot of stuff on the inside, but your voices are the ones that count. But I think what I want to say about oversubscription is the country used to be pretty good at supply and demand. It's terrible language, but it's all I can think of after 4 hours sleep. And there was lots of stories that for us, the broadcaster would trigger, and it was pretty balanced years and years and years ago. Not the case today. And there's less commissioning. There's less places for you as creators to go. We brought in the distributors last year in the hope they would work together with the broadcasters. Don't know if it's working. Got 3 calls in the car on the way to the airport about how this will work. So Karen's changing. Julie, you're doing so much great work on film, and Prem is so right about partnerships. None of us can do this alone. So if we don't work together, we won't get anywhere. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I'm worried about the story being first, because so much of this other stuff can get in the way of the story. And that's where we all need to go to really support it and get rid of these archaic, outdated structures. So supply and demand is a big issue for us.
I
Are you
love
on
this.
guest first?
Who is first? Fight over it. Julie, Karen.
No, I just wanted to, if you have a list for signature, would like to have Telefilm on the list, please, because our 50 millions is, the renewal of Telefilm funding is also something that is a lot of concerns for us. But anyway, that was not my point. But I just want to go back very quickly on AI, because a year ago in this stage, there was it Nicholas Ning? Yeah. He made such an incredible presentation. A year after that, I mean, it's evolving so quickly. So to answer your question about the shift, AI will transform our industry for sure. We need to have it in mind. And, the MIT technology, they just reviewed that there are a lot of bias in AI. That's a concern. There's not enough underrepresented people in the development process, and we need to be very careful with that. And at Telefilm, we asked Cathy Wong, who is our VP EDI Official Languages, to be the sponsor and the leader of the AI chantier as well. So anyway, this is something we have to embrace. There are risks for sure. There are also opportunities, but this is something I think will be the next major shift in our industry.
I just wanted to pick up on the theme about international. So shortage of financing. Even if we can get our money renewed, for the most part, none of us have new money. So there's increasing demand on the resources that we've got, and the increasing importance of the international marketplace, both for finding audience, but also for finding partnerships and funding. And I think we're trying to think about that in the design of our programs and the support that we're able to provide to each of you to get yourselves to those international markets, to find those partners, both from a programming perspective and from a financing perspective. I think that's also a really important shift for Canada. We're up against the US and all of that, content that is easily accessible and, generally speaking, sort of a cultural fit for Canada, and we really need to have those international markets in order to find our success for our content.
A couple of things I was going to say. One, Bobby Singh, I don't think you got traditional financing for the movie that was the opening night. He had to scrounge that money, dollar by dollar himself. So it's possible. There are countries out there that get no government funding. You do realize that, right? And so don't be the group that always waits and thinks you can't make your project unless government funding is a part of it. It's nice if it comes, but you can't stop, And, just a little backstory on something Valerie said that people might not know in the room. Was it even this year or last year? I can't remember, but literally it was like lunchtime for me, probably 4 p.m. where you were, that I got a call from Valerie going, the money, there's $60 million that we had for this 3 years literally finished like that Monday. Like, there was no money. The EDI, that money from CMF that a lot of you guys were getting benefit from, it wasn't. And the partnerships that Prem is talking about, we went into action, and in 48 hours, we had over 200 signatures of organizations pushing for this, and we got it by Monday morning to the government's office, and the budget people put $40 million back. It can be that kind of an action that actually moves it. But all of you are part of that action too. You can't be just sitting back waiting for other people to make those, pushes for you. We need you to do it, which brings me to, because I do not want to run out of time before we talk about expectations. Expectations with creatives out there and people working in this industry. I'll start by saying at Reelworld, we get over 400 submissions for films to be in the festival. We program 10 features. Keep that in perspective. And about 25 short films. We need to look at gender balance. We need to look at provincial balance. I can't take all 10 films out of Ontario. It'd be better for you to move to Newfoundland right now and submit a film, because that would be more helpful to us. We look at race. We can't have them all black films. We can't have them all Indigenous films. So I get so many people coming up, Tonya, my film didn't get in. It's not just, yes, we look at the quality, but a lot of those films, the quality is absolutely fantastic. But we can only choose 10, and it has to be across. So don't take those things so personally. Rent a theater.
It is personal. That's part of the problem.
It's too personal. But talk a little bit about expectations, too.
I hate this part of the conversation because it's so depressing. But none of you get up in the morning and say, I'm going to make a really shitty film today, right? Like, you all get up with your best intentions, your great creative brains, and then you find the money somewhere. I'm sorry you didn't get any government money, but don't count on it in the future. That's all I got to say about that. But it's such it's such a hard struggle, and I've been working in this field for just about 40 years. And the stress and pressure on the whole system has just done nothing but get tighter and tighter and tighter and increase. So after you get up in the morning and do all your great work, then you think what you've got is the best thing that the world has ever seen. And what is wrong with you funders and you people that you won't put money into this? This oversubscription thing has become a real issue, and it's because we've got all this great talent that's come into the system. And it's sort of like when a city expands, like Toronto does, and they haven't got the infrastructure to support it. It's like we have not changed the infrastructure to do something new and different, and everybody's here is working hard to do it. But it is about, there's just not enough resources, not enough demand. Well, there's demand, and Karen's absolutely right. International's a big part of it. But we have so much that's coming in the pipeline that can't be supported. And it's mostly for lack of money. Sometimes not everything is great. You guys know that yourself. You've got to do a few things to get there. But I don't know what we're going to do, because I know at the CMF we're still at least 60% oversubscribed in traditional linear TV. We're 149% oversubscribed on the gaming and VR side. We're way oversubscribed on the EDI program. Everything we do is oversubscribed, and I think it's pretty close for everybody else at the same. So we too are pivoting. I think we're going to have to, it was come one, come all. Everybody come to the table. And that raises a lot of expectations, and we're going to have to pivot. And I think for the CMF, we're going to have to I don't know what the answer is. We don't have the answer yet. We're talking to the industry this fall to try to figure out steps to the answer. But we're going to have to get a lot more curatorial. And I don't know what that means yet. But it just means, we've gone from, since I've been there, 1,200 applicants to just under 3,000. And so there's just, that's the picture. So I think we have to work together to find a different way. I think I said this already. Did I support these great stories? Because for us, the structures aren't working. And there's lots of ideas. There's lots of different funds coming. There's lots of ways to do it. But the oversubscription is really worrying me.
And Prem, how do you deal with those expectations?
Yeah, it is challenging. And, when you do get those 3,000 submissions in, you have to evaluate them all and fairly, and that slows down the process sometimes, and we're always trying to manage, working with Telefilm and CMF and others to ensure that our deadlines are all lining up, or that we're not disqualifying people from qualifying for CMF or Telefilm funding. So there's all of those things in it. I don't know if we can ever truly manage expectations for people's passion of their stories and everything that they've been working for years. And people do prove you can get something. You have made a film, you premiere at a festival without some of these supports, but it is stronger with those supports. And sometimes it's also looking at what are the other things on the table, whether they're tax credits or tax incentives in another country as well through co-productions, whether they're official or not. How are you leveraging those things? I think at the end of the day, it's also how do you support each other? So working on other people, your project may not have received the support, but who did receive support? Is there a way to connect with that producer or that writer and support their project or work with them. Because I do think that we do see more people going between projects. We have, we've always had a large production services industry in BC. So there are people that work on all kinds of things, on domestic IP, on international IP. So I think it is, the expectations around funding, they may not be met because the systems are continue to change. You may have heard there was an election in British Columbia the other day that is kind of ongoing, so we don't really know what the years ahead will look like in any way. So
Tell us what happened, Prem.
I
We
wish I
don't
could.
know.
I really wish I could. There's a provincial election that's still undecided for the most part, right? There's recounts happening. So things are getting tighter, right? Things are getting tighter. So I just always say, and I maybe I sound like I'm repeating things here because I am, but it is the work together, come together on projects even, and work on other people's things, because that is, your thing may not have been supported in the exact way you wanted to, but somebody else did. So, see if there's a way to work on that project and keep working is, I guess, the thing. Like, keep being involved in things, maybe not in the way you expect it to be, but there's a lot of other ways to do things, like working for Reelworld or something.
Exactly.
Paid
Not
opportunity.
for real world.
And then she's coming after the money to hire all those people.
That's okay, because Prem's going to give us more money to pay for the people working at Real World.
I would add one piece of advice to that, which is pay attention to the guidelines for the individual programs. Each of our organizations are unique in terms of what our mandate is and what we're looking for when we're evaluating applications. So using Tonya's old-fashioned photocopier thing, you can't literally photocopy the same application and submit it to each organization and expect that it will be equally successful, because we are looking for different things, and it's really important to pay attention to that. Certainly at Ontario Creates, and I think true for all of us, we're extremely transparent about what our evaluation criteria are, exactly what the juries are looking for, and we do use industry juries. So what percentage of the evaluation is focused on this thing or that thing or that thing? And you've got to make sure that the application that you're submitting is not just talking about the really great passion project, but that's actually addressing those particular things that we're looking for, and that will help get you into that, in our case, 25 or 35% sort of success rate. So that's an important thing to consider. We are, for instance, an economic development agency, so we're really looking for how many people are you going to hire in Ontario? How much are you going to spend in this province, which is different than a culturally oriented fund, and so on. So pay attention to that when you're doing your application.
Let's just grab Julie for a minute, and
Yeah.
then it'll be
I think
Valerie.
it's very, very good point, Karen. I said at the beginning that I am an optimistic person, try to remain that, but it's true that this oversubscribing is a real concern in some of our program. It's 90% of refusal. It's a lot. We try to stimulate interprovincial co-production, for example. And I do believe in partnership, and I would like to speak about the New Dawn Fund, which is an international fund. And I don't think that fund is well enough known. This is why I'm talking about this fund to you today. So we're about 7 countries to contribute. These are grants, and it's to really stimulate diversity in the international film industry. So again, pay attention to that. And we try to generate some different kind of revenues at Telefilm. We depend on the parliamentary appropriation for sure, but we have this talent fund with the philanthropy and try to have money there to fund our Talent to Watch program, which is for imaging filmmaker. So anyway, I think it's a very good point. We have a lot of targets. We just launched our Atlantic strategy because we want to stimulate as well regional talent. Again, in the same idea to make sure that the audience could see themselves on screen, whether it's gender, whether it's regional, linguistic, or cultural. So still optimistic.
And Valerie?
I was just going to add to Karen's, it's the same. You don't come to us. You have to get a broadcaster now, a distributor's agreement before you come to the CMF. But I don't know how many times I've heard broadcasters say, so they come in the room, they want to pitch, and I look at them and say, have you ever watched our channel? Like, go to the right place where your content will work for that particular market, whether it's domestic or internationally. And just a word on co-productions. We're very proud in Canada of how many we have. 60, Julie knows, probably I can't, 65, something like that.
Yeah.
And we use 5 or 6 regularly. But you don't always have to do official treaty. You can do co-ventures, especially even with US filmmakers. And because at one point in time, they're getting better, the co-production treaties were quite restrictive. They didn't reflect digital media. So we started an international partnership program with agencies like the CMF. And the advantage is we can put it out there. If we need to change it, we don't have to go all the way back to 2 big governments that can take, I think the India treaty took 10 years and it was out of date the day it was signed. So, you know, you can be more flexible because every morning you guys wake up and things have changed. So the international partnerships help with co-development, and then sometimes they've gone through the treaties once they get to that point. So there are other ways of looking for international partners than just trying to go down the treaty route. Just make sure you find somebody who values what you're trying to do. Just don't chase the money, because if you get the wrong partner, it's like a marriage. You're stuck there for many, many years. And no matter how good your paper is, you're still going to get divorced. I should know. I've been married 5 times. It's not a lot of fun when you go through that process. So find somebody who just doesn't say, oh, I can get money from France or Germany, or I can get money. Make sure you understand what you're both trying to do and that you value each other as people as well as valuing what the content of the story is.
We're going to open it up for questions, so start thinking now. But I just want to say, look, he's first, so you're going to be my first person. Just remember that. Some of the changes that we're doing at Reelworld are actually, you know, we focused a lot at Reelworld around government funding and funding that you can get, but we're also pushing now for what private equity, private funding looks like. And I think as we move Summit forward, that's what we're looking for, more people. And there are some workshops that are happening today with 3 different equity organizations, so look those up on the agenda and make sure that you go and see them. Gentleman in the hat, please. Someone with a microphone, I think, is supposed to be out there running to you right now with a swiftness so that you can, but I
I can just talk.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to talk. Yeah, I think, did you see the fund we were talking about with the New Dawn fund?
Right.
Okay, I just wrote it down. I just wanted to make sure I got that right. I just wanted to talk about the idea of when you send these projects to the evaluators, the mandate of the evaluators. What kind of directives do you give to those people to give new people a shot? You know, because I think you look at a project, you look at the viability of it. I'll take Bobby's project. That is insane what he did, and I'm sure that if somebody looked at it, they would go, well, I don't know how viable that is to shoot a movie for $250,000 over 4 years, piecemeal. I don't think I'm going to fund that. But then we watch this movie, and this is, I mean, of course, I think he's an exception to have done such a wonderful job with all of that adversity. I think he's an exceptional person to do that. And I understand that that's not necessarily the rule that you should be sending, like, just give everybody, these crazy people a shot. You know, I understand that that may not be good business sense. But what kind of mandates do you give to your criteria people to say, hey, first of all, people of color don't have the experience that other, you know, white males may have in the business, and so their resumes may not look as squeaky clean and as like tried and true. And I understand that that's a part of the mandate, but you know, you say that once you get through all your criteria, there's not a lot of wiggle room at the bottom there, and it's kind of crazy to call it the bottom, but. For more ambitious people who don't have the experience, what would you say to those people in terms of hope?
Well, you know, it's no secret this industry's been controlled by, you know, white men over the age of 50 for a very long time. And I think that's why the imperative for breaking down some of the, you know, it's not, I'm not being unfair. You know yourself. You meet a group of people, you constantly work with who you know, who you like, I just said, who shares your values, and can, for these big guys that control the industry, can deliver on budget, on time. That's just kind of a human thing, right? You don't want to put a lot of money at risk. I think that's why all of the programs that we do around equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility are so critical, because those become dedicated funds to allow exactly what you said to happen. to allow people to come in without maybe all that other stuff, to allow people to come in and experiment a little bit. And one of the good things that's happened in the last few years in the industry for us is the streaming services that are Canadian, like Crave or Two Point TV in the French market, or others, Gem at CBC. A lot of stuff is going there. And people say, oh, I can't get on like the main broadcast. But you can take a higher risk on those platforms. You don't have to spend quite as much money. You develop the chops, right? You get something on so people can see, and it builds from there. So I think without the awakening that happened with George Floyd's murder, probably we'd all be in the same structural space, but we're not there anymore. And I think that the world has woken up. And once you wake up, it's pretty hard to go back to sleep. And yes, it's true, there's a lot of backlash to what's happening out there. I know every person here is committed to moving forward and holding on to that commitment. It's going to be harder. Like, here's a number for you. The money that used to come to the CMF from the, what are they called again? The big telecoms, the broadcast, just TELUS, Rogers, all the big guys, it's the big money. 10 years ago, it was 331 million. Today, it's 200. You know, there's pressure on the federal, but I mean, all of that, yeah, nobody wants to talk about that kind of policy, but that's where the money actually comes from. So, I don't know, we're all fans of getting this done, trying to do it right, learning along the way, and continuing to support. And you're right, more mentorship, more training, and Telefilm. I don't know, is there a session today on what we're doing it together, or maybe not? Julie, you want to talk about it? We're working together, trying to do that.
The strategy?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we launched last week a partnership between Telefilm and CMF, a 3-year strategy to really focus on the BIPOC, so Black and people of color, really to work on capacity building, to improve common understanding and language and methodology for data collection, and to really work on the community engagement contribution. So these are the 3 pillars that Kathy Wong and Joy Lewin will work on. So they are here in the room. If you want to reach out to them, they will be more than happy to give you details about that. But again, it goes back to partnership, to build and to be stronger together, and to make our resources all together to really continue to make improvement in that field.
A lot of it's training, mentorship, and building that ladder. To your specific question, I would say you should be hopeful. Because I think actually our track record as funding organizations is changing quite dramatically, and it is by no means the old guard that are getting all of the funding these days. That's not what's happening.
They're upset. So upset.
Yes, we get those emails all the time too. But I think back to my point about pay attention to the criteria for each program, to make sure you're applying to the right ones, to make sure that what you're trying to do will fit best, and talk to the staff before you apply. Our teams want nothing more than for you guys to succeed in your funding applications, and they will work with you. They will give you good advice about how to strengthen that application, how to bring an EP in if that's what's necessary to sort of elevate the strength of your team and the experience of your team. There are ways to do that. So be hopeful, but work with us in advance.
And I'm just going to say, as someone who has juried at times of these grants, at least 40% don't even fill out everything they're supposed to fill out. Immediately, that entire application is taken out. The very least you need to do is answer everything and put in every piece of documentation that is required. That's the very least you should be doing. So it always breaks my heart to see a great project and all kinds of pieces of information are missing from the package.
It's really shocking how much that happens.
Yeah. Bobby? Oh, there's quite a few, so I'll answer quicker.
And I'll ask quickly. So what I'm hearing today is there's no money and don't expect to get funded.
Exactly.
You got it.
Okay.
No, not
thank
true.
you.
So you'll be
this
just
was
like
a
the
wonderful
USA
panel.
now.
Thank you so much. See, it's very difficult for somebody like me who I know what I'm capable of. I think Thank you, sir. That was very sweet. But I still can't break through with you guys for some reason. And it's incredibly frustrating knowing what I've submitted. I checked all the balances. I know I hired somebody to put in our reports. And watch Deepa Mehta get funded again. Watch the Brahmanis get funded again. That is very difficult to take as an outsider, right? There's a lot of talented people here. I've watched some of this stuff. It is really good. I hate the nepotism in this business, and there's a lot of it. How are you guys going to change that? And how are you going to change the old boxes that you're trying to get rid of and not create new ones?
Who's going to touch that question?
They told me to stop talking, so not me.
Well, I do acknowledge the frustration. I mean, I hear you, and I acknowledge that for sure. From an internal decision maker, and I don't want to be defensive, just want to try to explain how it works internally from a decision maker perspective, because to have a balanced portfolio and balance, we need to consider so many different things: gender, linguistic, racialized, targets from across the country. It is a challenge. You're adding sustainability, eco-responsibility on this. So at the end of the day, I just spoke about the Atlantic strategy. We're having, some targets there, official languages as well. So it's difficult to have a balanced portfolio. We tried and we started to change and having KPIs, for Black and people of color in development and then in production. But it's true, and maybe we're maybe too traditional, but there is kind of a path. And, Talent to Watch is used to be the first feature film door, for example. And then you can access to low budget, and then you can access to high budget. And, we receive some proposal in the high budget from people that didn't make any film. They are not knocking at the right door. So this is why I agreed so much. But it is difficult, and it's going to take time. But this is why we're going to have a third EDI plan to make sure that we continue and we build at every, in the chain of value that Telefilm is there to support everywhere. Because we're talking about production. But then, what do we do when a film is made? It has to be shown, and people need to have access to that film. So we do support, for example, international travels. The Canadian Pavilion at Cannes, for example, many years ago, we give the pavilion to the ISO and the year after to BSO to make sure that they can meet partners, international partners, to build on co-production and to meet some festival programmers, for example. So we need to have in mind that it's a whole chain of value, and not forget that it's not only about producing, but it's also about being seen and being watched and being discovered by the audience. Anyway, long story, long answer, but I think it will be a long process to make the total shift.
And because we're literally 1 minute to go, let's just hear what some of the questions are so that everyone here is even aware. Let's just hear this gentleman's question here.
Hello, hi there. My name is Aaron Maxwell Williams. I'm a writer and actor here in Toronto. I'm curious whether or not you have any insights on whether there is a discrepancy between what creators, specifically in Ontario, are making against what the rest of the country is actually interested in watching. I wonder if there's any insights there.
I love that question. And someone else over there, is there someone else that had a question here? It's just great to even hear the questions, and there may be answers and then they'll come to.
Yes, this is a question for Prem. You mentioned partnerships between Ontario and BC, and I wanted to know if you were able to share some previews as to what those partnerships would look like and when it would come.
So think about that, Prem.
Hello, everyone. My name is George Alvisos. I'm one of the vice presidents of Actor Toronto, and I'm also a performer. My question for all of you is, how are we, with this shift in the industry, how are we supporting pre-production and giving people the money to be able to do accessible initiatives within the industry going forward with such a crunch in the industry? Because I feel like there's still a lack of knowledge around that, and there is not enough of that. So I just wanted to put that
I love that
into your head.
question. Anyone else had one here? Andrew, anyone over here with a question? Good, thank you. Andrew will be the last.
Hi, yeah, I mean, it's more of a comment too anyway. So I
Even
mean,
better.
I think like, jumping off of what Bobby said, like as somebody who's like financed all my films privately as well, like I think one of the biggest things that we face as filmmakers, even though we've financed it privately, is that there's a bias, right? Like we face a bias in the industry that we're outside of the industry. So like not having the Telefilm logo on it, the CMF logo on it, we're not looked at the same way, right? So it's like we can't break certain barriers, right? So like I had my film here awarded all the awards, but it was perceived in no credibility across other organizations, like the Canadian Screen Awards, which I never got a nomination for because it's not viewed the same way that if it was programmed at, say, Whistler Film Festival, which is like, because it's a white organization. So we feel that a lot, that like filmmakers of color, like we're just viewed as filmmakers of color. We don't make actually anything that's credible or of quality, right? But we have to finance it privately because it's difficult to break those barriers, right? So we just stick at this ceiling that makes it very difficult. So my thing is like, I can get my film privately financed, but I want to get it funded by the government just for perception purposes, right? Not for the money.
Good point.
Such a good point.
That's
Right.
such a good point. So wait, these are great questions. Prem, answer the Vancouver one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, Aaron's here and Karen from Ontario Creates. It's a lot of things we're doing in international markets where we're co-hosting events together with BC producers, Ontario producers, with international people. Even here last week, Ontario Creates hosted the BC producers and had all the sessions in their offices. So it's even things, it's not necessarily joint funding programs always, but we're often involved in the same things. So how do we leverage what we're doing in those places and bringing people together to even meet each other, to start talking about how, if you live in BC, if you live in Ontario, how you can do things together and leverage those programs in both provinces. So really setting up to what you were saying, Julie, on the, you know, the Canada Pavilion in Cannes or Berlin or wherever it is, how do we do that, you know, more effectively together? And there's a few BC producers attending here as well. So that's getting people to those markets as well, even when they're within Canada, to be able to connect.
And with only 1 minute to go, does anyone here want to answer any one of these questions that were said or commented?
I want Bobby to tell me what can fix what you just said, because you're right. You break down the old boxes without getting new ones. That's already happening. Do you have thoughts on that?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, I guess that means I'm having coffee with him or something. Okay, that's fine.
So something I'm going to close, but I love this. This is why we like to keep the summit like this, because it becomes
Karen
a
has an
conversation.
idea.
Oh,
You have an idea.
Karen had an idea?
Oh, no, it's okay. Go ahead. I was just
No,
going to say thank
no.
you for the questions.
Yeah.
Please know we're listening. These are all very interesting points and things I hadn't considered before. Maybe there are ways we can find to support projects that don't necessarily involve great big checks and so on.
Karen, you and I are thinking the same thing, because
Yeah.
Andrew, I'd never really thought about
Yeah.
this or heard this before, and I thought, even if you guys chipped in 5,000, 10,000, and put your logo on it, it could improve people's chances now that you're hearing that.
Yeah.
Please
It
keep
doesn't have to be
Just
100.
keep talking to us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea.
a great idea.
And you're right, like, it's just, never mind.
It's
So
something like-
frustrating. I know you guys are, it's just they're big barriers, still.
Thank you. This is a great conversation. Thank you to the panelists here. Thank you to all of you.